It's over. We are not the center of the world economy the way we were.
Africa need to use your own brain power to make up your own judgment.
Another change to take place, and that other change would be, as far as I can see, China. China will become the number one country in the world.
No question whatsoever that power is shifting from west to east.
We lost the war in Vietnam. We lost the war in Afghanistan. We lost the war in Iraq, and we're in the process of losing it in Ukraine. Hint! What is that about? These are not just wars the United States lost, but let's be clear. The United States, one of the richest countries in the world, went to war in countries that are among the poorest in the world and were defeated. It's over. We are not the center of the world economy the way we were. Every country in the world is rethinking its strategy. Political, economic, military, ideological. Every company in the world that has any international business is trying to figure out, what does this mean?
China will become the number one country in the world.
Are you comfortable with China taking on a bigger role in the world?
We have had relations with China for 2,000 years. China never conquered us. The Portuguese came, within 2 years they conquered us. Any country which develops well can prosper, can dominate the world. But now it was at one time the British controlled the whole world. At some stage they failed, and America took over. And America became the number one country in the world. Now the time is for a change, another change to take place. And that other change would be, as far as I can see, China. China will become the number one country in the world.
Let me turn to the BRICS, because it's very, very important. They just had their summit meeting in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil over the last week or so. And I need to explain to people that reality, the BRICS, the whatever it is now, I think 8 or 9 member countries and another dozen or so partner countries that are on their way to becoming member countries. It started off, the very word BRICS is an anagram: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. That's what BRICS stands for. And then a bunch of countries have joined since. If you want to understand what it means, let me give you 2 statistics. I'm an economist. That's what we do. We play with statistics the way little children play with toys. And it is, let me assure you, a toy. The population of the United States, 330 million, works out to 4.5% of the world's people. If you put together the United States with its major allies, the so-called Group of Seven, or G7, it's the United States, Canada, Japan, Britain, France, Germany, and Italy. What was the core of the world economy for the last 75 years. You add up their populations and you come up with, 15, 16% of the world's people. Now let me turn to the BRICS. You add them all up, it's over half the people of this planet. No contest. They are large and we are small. Let me give you the second statistic. In economics, we have a rough measure of the size of an economy. It's called the GDP, Gross Domestic Product. And every country and the UN keep track of that. Okay, if you add up the gross domestic product of the G7, that's the United States and its major allies, it works out to about 28% of the total output of this planet that we live on here, Earth. If you do the same, you add up the GDP of the BRICS alliance, it's 35% of the world's output. In other words, the United States and its allies, who were from 1945 to around 2010, 12, 15, the dominant economic powerhouse. And what does that mean? It means when every country, any country in Asia, Africa, or Latin America needed help in one way or another, they would send a mission to New York or Washington or London, and they would hope to get this and so forth. And they had pitch people go and explain why that would be helpful and so forth. Nowadays, they do that. They send a mission to New York and London, but that mission doesn't go back to its African country of origin or its Latin American country. They go directly from Washington and London to Beijing and New Delhi and Sao Paulo.
Yes.
And they make the same pitch there.
And they're more likely to receive a fair hearing of that pitch in those
Not only
countries.
that, because they're dealing with the richer of the two options. And they're going to therefore get, not every time, but most of the time, a better offer. That's why they go. And the Chinese, who are the major player here, are the ones who say, yes, we'll build a railroad and we'll do it for this amount of money less than what the Americans or the British or the French or the Germans offered you. And so, by the way, the railroads of Africa are currently being built by China. And China is making all the inroads that go with all of that.
Africa need to use your own brain power to make up your own judgment. In the world of today, you hear a lot of talks about whether, Africa should be forced to make a choice between China versus the United States. I think that's the wrong choice. The real choice for Africa, as well as for the rest of mankind, is whether the United States is doing the right thing or is doing the wrong thing, or whether China is doing the right thing or doing the wrong thing. If the United States is doing the right thing, work with the United States. But if the United States is doing the wrong thing, why should you bother about working with the United States or following its leadership? Similarly, if China is doing the right thing, why don't you want to work with China? And, God forbid, if China is doing the wrong thing, why should you work with China? That means African countries, people in Africa, need to use your own brain power to make a decision first, whether this country or that country is doing the right thing or the wrong thing. Don't be forced by any other country to make a choice which will not serve your fundamental interest. Now, when I traveled a little bit in Rwanda yesterday, in Kigali, let me tell you my real observation. I think Kigali is in better shape today compared with China back in 1978, when China started to reform and opening to the outside world, attracting FDI into China. The philosophical point I want to emphasize is that if China can do this in 46 years, Rwanda and Africa can do it in the coming 4 decades or so. Have faith in yourself. Keep faith in yourself. China is a success story which can be repeated by the great people here in Rwanda and the great people here in Africa. Now, another piece of advice. What is the foundation upon which security should be based, not only for Rwanda but for Africa? Security never exists in a vacuum. Security should be based on several things, which are the pillars. One is maintain stability at home. The other one is keep peace with your neighbors. And the third one, as Deng Xiaoping, for whom I had the great honor to work with before, development is the hard truth. Develop, develop, develop. I understand even in this great country of Rwanda, you may not have sufficient amount of power. Focus on that. Get that done. That will provide a much better context whereby security for Rwanda, security for Africa as a continent will be better reinforced. Thank you.
Wow.
No question whatsoever that power is shifting from west to east, and the relative positions of Asian powers and European powers have changed significantly. So let me begin with one statistic. In the year 1980, the combined GNP of the European Union was 10 times bigger than China, 10 times. Today, the European Union is about the same size as China. And by 2050, the European Union will be half the size of China. So for the European Union to go from being 10 times bigger than China to becoming half the size of China is an indication of how power is shifting dramatically to Asia.
It's finally becoming clear that as much as these countries rely on the dollar, the United States relies on these countries. Decades of outsourcing cheap labor overseas and relying on cheap materials is finally catching up to the U.S. In fact, if you look at the United States and its ally countries, the G7, it is true that they represent about 43% of the world's GDP, whereas the BRICS bloc represents only about 30%. But the BRICS bloc has almost double the landmass and quadruple the population size. They have the labor, they have the raw materials, including oil production, which again has been the protector of the US dollar's position of power. It's becoming more and more clear that while the United States is in charge of the present, they are not going to be in charge of the future.